Welcome to Sikhcast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Sukhman Kaur and I am the Associate Editor on the Guru Granth Sahib project. We are pleased to announce the release this month of 2 Sabads under the title Anjuli and 2 Sabads under the title Anjulia, all of which were revealed by Guru Arjan Sahib. The word Anjuli itself refers to sort of image of the cupped hands held together in offering. While this gesture is associated with greeting or respect, in this composition, it carries also a deeper meaning, a humble offering, and at the same time, a readiness to receive or an openness to receive. In this way, it reflects the relationship between a seeker and Ikonkar, one of devotion, one of surrender, and one of hope to be graced by Ikonkar. I'd like to focus on one of the 4 Banis, or one of the 4 Shabads in this release, Shabad 1, under the title Anjuli. This particular composition was revealed in Rag Maru, a musical mode associated with sort of the imagery of battle and warfare. And then this particular composition calls forth this sense of victory, not one over others, but within ourselves or over the kind of like lowercase self, if we can think about it in that way. Maru, or the Rag Maru, connects us to this energy, to this effort required to kind of come up against or confront or overcome these inner battles. We face our battles against our egos, our vices, and the habits that we often accumulate in our perceived separation from Ikonkar. There's a particularly powerful movement within this Shabad, and it's when Guru Arjan Sahib takes us back to the very beginning of our lives, our time in the womb. Our team translates this as, where the fire burns like a furnace, there, in pitch darkness, the being is lying upside down. Where that being remembers the master breath by breath, there, the master has rescued it. This imagery feels particularly striking to me at this moment in time. The womb is described as a furnace, intensely hot, disorienting, and completely dark. So if I can kind of relate to it for a minute, I'm thinking of it sort of as like a kiln, something that like takes sort of like raw or like unbaked matter and applies like this like really kind of like extreme amount of heat and pressure and takes this like raw material and forms it into this like more complete final creations. But it's in this space that the being is described as being upside down. So it's like a space that not only like must be endured, it like sounds extremely uncomfortable, but it's also a space that needs to be, or like must be survived. And yet, like within this darkness, within this like utter kind of vulnerability, something remarkable is revealed. In this state, we are described as being in complete and full remembrance, utter remembrance of Ikonkar. And it's through this remembrance that we even survive the womb. What is so humbling about this in particular, this like sort of like sense of like total darkness that's being described, this incredible vulnerability, this incredible fragility that we experience is like in that state is when we're in complete and utter remembrance of Ikonkar. So the womb is a space that we so many things must align for survival, for a baby to like emerge and to be born, most of which we like do not perceive, a lot of which, unfortunately, we don't even really like necessarily fully understand yet. And oftentimes the womb can be described as like a sort of threshold between life and death. So it's this very kind of highly complex, really fragile state, really incredibly vulnerable state we are in. And there is no certainty, like not that there is a lot anyways, but particularly in the womb, it's described as such. And in the womb, there is no distraction, there's no identity, and sort of most key is there's no sense of like self as separate. We're simply held in connection. And this reminds me, I have a nephew who's not even a full year yet. He's like 6 or 7 months. And when he was first born, like he couldn't distinguish. He just didn't have a sense of like, he couldn't distinguish between himself and his mom, let alone like other people. It was all just like kind of, he just didn't have that. It just wasn't in his consciousness. He just didn't think about those things. And now that he's a little bit older, we've seen that he can like kind of distinguish between people, and he like has a sense of like, okay, this is this person, and this is this person, and this is me, you know, and he's developing all these feelings. Like for the first time, 6 months, we saw him get mad, and we were like shocked because for so long, you know, he had come out and he was born and he didn't have no sense of anger or jealousy or other. It just simply did not exist for him. It just wasn't there. It's because when we are in the womb, when we're kind of like before we're born, we are sustained entirely by the one, at the will of the one, or rather even by the grace of the one. But then the moment we enter the world, everything shifts. We begin to forget this connection, forget, you know, to be in remembrance. And what appears to us as like kind of coming into clarity is particularly described in the Western world as like into light and into awareness. In a deeper sense, in the context of this composition, is in itself in its own kind of inversion. So in the womb, though physically upside down, you know, a baby is lying with its head like down. In that state, we are described as being aligned in remembrance. And then in the world, when we emerge, when we're born, though we're technically physically upright, we've actually become disoriented. We've become inverted. Everything, in a sense, kind of turns upside down. And in this shift, what we had perceived, or what we talk about as like entering the world, is actually inversion, because where we were at one point aware of that fragility, maybe more aware of our own vulnerabilities, we were in remembrance. And now that we've emerged out of that state, we no longer feel like we're in remembrance. So that awareness that was once anchored in the one becomes attached to the world. Our sense of identity begins to form around what we see, around what we feel, around what we experience, sometimes what we don't even experience, around our relationships, our preferences, our achievements. And you'll see many of those sorts of imagery and that kind of language used in actually all 4 of these compositions of Guru Arjan Sahib's under Anjuli and Anjulia. But here, slowly, we sort of believe, or we come to believe, that these things are who we are. So, you know, in the womb, it's dark and it's confined and it's seemingly unstable, but we're aligned in remembrance. And then in the world, it's like full of light and stimulation and movement and energy and all these things, but we've become disoriented. We've kind of sort of lost that sense of remembrance, or the ability. Guru Arjan Sahib invites us to reflect on this sort of inversion, this like reversal, not just as a description, for certainly not, but as sort of a condition with which, or in which, we continue to live in. So if remembrance is what sustained us then, in this sort of like most intense and vulnerable state, I wonder, like, what would it mean to return to that same sense of remembrance now? What would that look like? You know, what would my behavior be? What would my thinking, you know, or what would change and sort of like invert, or maybe revert about my thinking, and sort of how I approach the world. So I invite you to get comfortable and take time reading through the literal and the interpretive transcriptions as always. Our commentaries, you know, sort of allowing yourself the time to engage and reflect on these 4 compositions in this release of Anjuli and Anjulia. As always, we have word meanings, grammar, and etymology for every single word in all 4 of these compositions. We have the historical, musical, poetical, and introduction files to sort of provide context. So I really, do hope that you are able to take some time and engage with these really beautiful and really striking compositions. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Read the translations and commentaries at gurugranthsahib.io.
You are listening to Sikhcast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.